Representative McBride from Delaware.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Keating, and thank you very much to our witnesses for your time and your expertise. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of crises and urgent situations that demand the U.S.'s attention right now. While the Western Balkans may not always receive the headlines or attention it deserves, this region remains crucial to both American interests and those of our European allies. Ignoring simmering tensions in the Western Balkans is a poor strategy that we conduct at our own peril. Right now, it seems like this administration lacks a coherent foreign policy strategy. President Trump is levying high tariffs on some of our closest allies while removing sanctions on Balkan politicians allied with Putin. Closer to home, he just pardoned the former Honduran president, who was convicted by a jury of conspiring with drug cartels to move more than 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. That comes at the same time the president seems to be looking to start a war with Venezuela and is conducting extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean over alleged drug trafficking. The lawlessness and corruption is dangerous and it is deadly. Mr. Coffey, I want to return to a subject that I know my colleagues have already brought up at length, which is the Trump administration's recent decision to remove sanctions on Milorad Dodik, the nationalist politician who has undertaken a series of actions that threaten to undermine the Dayton peace agreement. This agreement, as you've talked about, is imperfect, but is critical in maintaining stability in the Balkans. In March of this year, Secretary Rubio described Dodik's actions as, quote, dangerous and destabilizing. And so I'm curious if you could expand on your perception of how this action by the Trump administration undermines the national security interests of the United States, and at the risk of asking you to explain the justification for a decision that you disagree with, could you shed any light for us on what the administration might be thinking with the sanctions removal?
Thank you, Representative McBride. It should be noted, tying back to what Representative Davidson said earlier about the announcement that the U.S. is stopping a rotational brigade to Romania, this is connected actually because both announcements were made on the same day. And we might not think that these issues are connected, that the administration is not that joined up where they would be messaging something, but certainly our friends and allies and our adversaries in Europe can see it this way. I don't know the thinking behind removing these sanctions. It wasn't made clear by the administration why they were doing this. As I pointed out in my oral statement, it wasn't made clear what, if anything, we got in return. What I do know is that leading up to this point, there were several op-eds placed around town, and then voila, out of nowhere, Milorad Dodik is removed from the sanctions list. So one can infer what they want from this, but I do wonder, what sort of internal processes took place to arrive to this decision. And I guess this would be a matter for the legislative branch to try to figure out. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that answer. And I think to your point around connecting dots, I find this move very disturbing, and it seems to follow a clear pattern of wealthy or well-connected individuals obtaining get-out-of-jail-free cards from President Trump. The New York Times reported that Mr. Dodik hired allies of President Trump, such as Rudy Giuliani, to advocate for the removal of those sanctions. And so it seems to me to be very suspicious behavior. Professor Joseph, I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to your perception of the potential for corruption to undermine our national security interests and what message this particular action and the circumstances that I've outlined that surround it, what message that could send to our allies.
Thank you, Representative McBride, for that question. And we see the evidence of corruption and in the relationship that China has with Serbia, which is built on corruption and which has so angered the Serbian people who have mobilized under the banner "Corruption Kills," correctly so. And so it's very clear. China uses this, these so-called investment deals that are completely opaque and that are destructive. And we see now that there's a problem, that you cannot get away with this forever. So corruption is an enormous problem. And one other thing from the IRI poll, Serbia is the only country in that poll in which the citizens have stated that corruption is the #1 problem. It's ranks very high across the region, including Bosnia-Herzegovina and neighbors, also North Macedonia and all of them. But only in Serbia do citizens say it is the #1 problem, and our officials should be highlighting. This is missing in this sharp debate, this charged debate now in Serbia. Our officials should be highlighting the fact that this was China, Belt and Road, and they were the general contractors on this fatal construction.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.